I've done some funny writing, and as I was yesterday, still kind of recovering from my procedure at the dentist, my mouth was all numb, and so I was writing something, and this is what it was. I have always been able to interact with people from all walks of life. I am certain that this is due to my embodied language. Although it wasn't until I was about 20 years old that I discovered the great difference between my disembodied language, in which I didn't listen to myself while I spoke, and my embodied language, in which I listen to myself while I speak. With my embodied language, I live up to my name, Maximus, which means the biggest. To me, embodied language is as big as life itself. I view everyone with disembodied language as big as life and twice as ugly, because disembodied language is everywhere, yet it is sounding so disgusting to me. I'm still not over the fact that surprisingly everyone unknowingly engages in disembodied language, while I seem to be the only one who notices this obvious suffering, which is involved in this profoundly problematic behavior. I bet my life that anyone who, like me, acknowledges the difference between disembodied language and embodied language will prefer embodied language and stop being involved in disembodied language. Stop sacrificing your life to disembodied language. However, the distinction is only going to become clear to those who consider it a life and death situation. Yes, I really mean that. Simply stated, with embodied language, we come back to life again. But with disembodied language, we are dead as far as our use of language is concerned. The shift from disembodied language to embodied language is like rising from the death, rising from the grave. In disembodied language, we live like zombies. With embodied language, we are guaranteed to get alive. But with disembodied language, we are in denial of the facts of life. Surely, to switch from disembodied language to embodied language, one gets the shock of one's life. Yeah, you will have a big shock when you will experience that difference. So, we're guaranteed to get the shock of one's life. With embodied language, one is bound to have the time of one's life. Yes, that you will have the time of your life with embodied language. And being in the prime of one's life has a different meaning in disembodied language and in embodied language. In disembodied language, it means that you are very young, yeah, in the prime of your life. But in embodied language, it means being eternally young because you always feel the new, you always experience the new. Yeah. It is, of course, best to learn about the distinction between disembodied language and embodied language early on, but one can still discover it and be benefited from it late in life. In disembodied language, we lay down our lives for matters which never satisfy us. Even a dog's life is better than a life with disembodied language. With disembodied language, we perpetually repeat so many lies, such as that life is just too short. In embodied language, we always have plenty of time for everything. Our discovery of our embodied language is the most important milestone in our life. Yes, it will be. In disembodied language, we inadvertently make each other's lives miserable. Everyone is blaming each other in disembodied language, but the fact is, we make our own life into hell with our own disembodied language. Never in one's meaningless life with disembodied language does one recognize that private speech in our language, covert self-talk, or what we call thinking or mind, is an illusion that is created by our own disembodied language. A patient who is almost dead may receive life support in the hospital, but we live our lives with disembodied language as permanent victims of life itself, and we hang on to our own identity, our belief in verbal behavior within our own skin for dear life. Certainly, our worthless experience with disembodied language is our way of life. Yeah. Once we stop our disembodied language and engage in embodied language, we acquire a new lease on life. But as long as we remain stuck in disembodied language, we run away from our own life. In disembodied language, we say, "Such is life," but this always applies to the negative circumstances which inevitably are repeated and recreated due to our disembodied language. To talk with someone like me, who knows how to have ongoing embodied language, is a chance of once in a lifetime. We say in disembodied language that variety is the spice of life, because we are not free. That's why we seek variety. Once we know how to have embodied language, however, we like to keep doing what we're doing, as we are no longer seeking distraction or entertainment. The quality of life is greatly enhanced by our embodied language, so much so that we consider our ongoing embodied language as our language enlightenment. Only because we are unable to admit and stop our disembodied language do we take our own life or the lives of others. However, we don't even need to commit suicide or kill someone else, as we are already dead and we fail to be alive with our disembodied language, which is repetitive and tedious. Only with embodied language are we able to live according to our own light. Yes. Actually, we hear the light rather than see the light with embodied language. We really feel light as a feather. Peculiarly, we don't begin to see the light. We don't begin to see the light. I'm beginning to see the light. No, we don't begin to see the light with embodied language, as there is no end to it. That is, we always know that embodied language continues, even though we stop. And when we are clear, when we have embodied language, we are always clear and without fear. In disembodied language, we imagine that we begin to see the light as we are carried away by what is being said in such a way that the notion of covert language seems reasonable and necessary. With disembodied language, nothing ever comes to light as we imagine our language to be happening inside. Yes, this is a game of words. With our embodied language, we give ourselves the green light to be who we are. But we don't get off lightly of our history of conditioning with disembodied language. Therefore, there will be many instances that we still be seeing things wrong in the light of our usual way of talking, which is disembodied language, as we don't hear our own sound. So we see things wrongly because we don't hear our own sound. Once we put the spotlight on our own voice while we speak, we don't make light of our disembodied language anymore, as it is really seriously problematic. The famous so-called light at the end of the tunnel prolongs our participation in disembodied language, but it never stops it. Hearing the ugliness of our disembodied language is the only way to stop it. Our disembodied language, again and again, tries to steal the spotlight, yet our tone of voice is our attention for the here and now. Once the difference between disembodied language and embodied language is revealed by our sound, we want to avoid disembodied language like the plague. You'll be like an open book, but not to others, but to yourself. You feel like $1 million, and your life runs like a clockwork. Life fits like a glove, and you feel like a new person, as you are no longer bothered by what you believe to be your mind. At some point, you know yourself like you know the palm of your hand. Disembodied language is like looking for a needle in a haystack, or like a fish out of the water. Disembodied language is like a house on fire, and you are like a sitting duck. Your depression is so severe with disembodied language because you're full of self-pity, as you're convinced you're like a lamb that is brought to the slaughter. Moreover, you feel that you are so special, like nothing on earth, but the fact is you run around like a chicken with its head cut off. Nothing is to your liking. Supposedly, you live and learn, but you have yet to live with embodied language and let yourself live with embodied language. Yeah, to live and let live, right? You have yet to live with embodied language and let yourself live with embodied language. Yeah. You can't live for the moment in disembodied language, although you may live high off the hog. Yes, you live in your ivory tower, you live on borrowed time, you live out of your suitcase, as if you are living in your self-created chaos with disembodied language. With embodied language, you finally live within your own means. You are not only making a living, you're making a very good living with embodied language. Your embodied language is truly a labor of love. With embodied language, no love is lost anymore on stupid disembodied language. You live it up with your embodied language because you do what you want to do to please yourself. You've lived through enough disembodied language to know that you want to live up to your ability to have embodied language.